Hello, so today we are going to be analyzing another classical game. This one is played by Alexander Tolush and Mikhail Botvinnik, and this is a pretty nice game. So Botvinnik's playing with the black pieces, and his opponent goes for d4. We get knight to f6 here, and here we get c4. We get g6 here, knight to c3, and d5, known as the Grunfeld opening. We get bishop to f4, and then we get bishop to g7. E3 is played, castles, rook c1, c5. This is theory. I don't really know too much of this because I don't play this opening. So d takes c5, queen and queen to a5. And in this position, basically, black sacrifices both center pawns here for a lot of compensation. After rook to d8, if you evaluate the position carefully here, black has 4 pieces developed already compared to white's 1. This is the only piece probably developed. The rook's not developed yet, the queen's not developed, and the knight's pinned. Uh, so probably 2 or 1 pieces developed here, and white's pawns are very weak here. And as soon as black wins both pawns, black is going to be better. So we get queen to d2 here. Uh, Bishop to c4 is a good move here, just to defend the pawn. But instead, we get the move queen to d2 here, get unpinning the knight here, and here we get knight takes d5. And here, white plays a very interesting move, bishop to c7. And this is a mistake because we can just go queen takes c7. But there are some ideas. First of all, if you take with the knight, then you're losing because the rook hangs. If you go here, then now there's knight takes d5. And you really have to play something here. If you go queen to d7 here, we have a playable position where we have the bishop pair. Uh, we're down a pawn, but like after something like rook d8 and then knight here. Uh, this is just a solid position here where black has very much a lot of compensation, but there's something better than that. Instead, after knight takes d5, first of all, you can't go queen to e5 because of knight to f6 check, and if you go here, there's check. You can pause the video and solve the puzzle. The move is rook takes d5, an exchange sacrifice here. The idea being that after queen takes d5, what's going to happen is black is going to develop all of these pieces with tempo. So we get bishop to e6, and if you become greedy and take this pawn, then after rook to c2, bishop to e6 attacking the queen, queen to d2, bishop to g7, and knight to f3. Uh, Suddenly, white might be developing all pieces here, and you have to play very carefully because you will lose the advantage here, and you will lose the game if you're not very careful here. Because you need to make sure that white can't develop any pieces. You can't give them any time. So we get bishop to e6 immediately, developing the bishop here, putting a tempo on the queen. We get queen to d2, and after that we get knight to c6, developing the knight. And here, if you go for something like knight to 3, then just a rook d8 is very strong here. And basically, after something like bishop to d3, there is just bishop to f5 here. And there's not much you can do. So, we get rook d1 here. And after rook d8, we get queen to c1. After this, we get an important check, queen to a5. This check is very good because there is no knight to block it or bishop. And if you go here, then you lose a queen. If you go here, you lose a queen. So you can't block it. The only thing you can do is block with the rook or go to e2. Now, if you go to e2, then rook takes, queen takes, and after queen takes a2, we are better here because we're going to win this pawn, and their king is just in the center naked. So we get rook d2, blocking off the check but pinning the rook in the process. And here we get rook to d5. Uh, Now rook takes d2 is playable, and after something like queen takes d2, queen takes a2, this is does lead to a very good advantage because you're going to win this pawn, then you're going to march on the a pawn down the board and win a lot of material. But rook d5 is even better because we're hitting this pawn, and the rook cannot take the rook here because of the pin. So after this move, we get the move knight to e2 because you can't really defend the pawn here. And after knight to e2, we just get takes. And if knight to f3, then there's takes here, and then you win that pawn, and all the queenside pawns are basically gonna fall. So we get knight to e2, so that after rook takes c5, we can go knight to c3 here and develop more pieces. But simply bishop takes c3 here, and after takes, just taking with the rook, and we are just completely better here because of the amount of pieces we have developed here, and we're going to win the queenside pawns, and on top of that, their king is still in the center. They go queen to b2 here, targeting this pawn, hitting the rook, putting pressure on the rook, and here we get rook a3. Rook a3 targets this pawn, and if you take, then there's just rook takes a2. If you take the free pawn on b7, and you cannot defend this, you can give a check, but then just king g7 here, and you're losing. And you have to go here and then here, and then anyway you cannot stop this. So you cannot take the pawn. So white here, because they are under a huge attack here, they decide, okay, let's trade the queens with queen to b7 here. Uh, so trading here is a very terrible decision here because now it's equal. Yes, you can take this, but then this endgame is better for white because of all the weak pawns here. So this isn't what you want to go for because their king is still in the center. Black simply goes for queen to c3, keeping the pin and dodging a queen trade. Now, queen to b2 is the move played in the game, and if you take this pawn over here, then there's just rook takes a2, and you're losing the rook again. So we get queen to b2 here, and after queen to b2, queen takes the queen takes is all queen takes b2 is obviously bad here, and after that we just get queen to c5. And now if you go for queen to b5 here, then what's going to happen is, excuse me, queen to c1 check here, and if you go king to e2, then there's just bishop to c4 check, and you win the queen. And if you go rook d1, then after I give a check, you cannot go to e2 because of the fork. So you go rook d2, and suddenly we get the same position, but now it's black to move. We are tempo up in this position, so white doesn't go for that. Instead, goes for queen to b1, and you can pause to solve. There's just a clean way to win the game here, and that move is bishop takes a2. After, after rook takes a2, we're going to give a check on a5 and win the rook. Now, if you go here, then this is just bad. So rook d2 is the better option, and then after rook a1, we have an endgame where it's queen against two rooks and knight versus bishop. Now what happens in the game, instead of taking here, which would have been worse for white, is bishop to d3, so that they're at least he's trading on his terms. And anyway, this position is completely winning because of the two pawns here and the fact that this rook is pinned, this king is, and this king is weak. White's king is weak, so we just get knight to e5, bringing the knight into the game. We had king to e2, queen to b5 check, bishop d3. We get a trade here, and black is just slowly gonna push the pawns here. And rook d1, queen c4, king to f3, b5, and black is just pushing the pawns and is going to win the game. Rook d7 here. If after b4, if you take the pawn, then b3 here, and It is very hard to stop these pawns. So you get rook to a7, targeting that pawn, but simply a4 here, and you can't push because then queen to c6 check here, and we pick up the rook. So after that, we get rook d8, giving a check. King to g7, rook da8, a3, g3, and after queen to b5, white resigns because this position is completely winning, and eventually white's just going to push these two pawns here, and there's nothing you can do here because your rooks have to stay passive and then eventually push. You just push the pawn here, and that's the game. So one key point in the game here was knight takes d5 and an exchange sacrifice here for a lot of compensation in terms of development. And then another key moment here is that when white offered a trade of queens here, you denied because white's king is still in the center. Because if you trade queens, there's not much of an attack. And then queen to b2, and then black went on to win a very nice game. And that's the end of the video, and bye.